Now and then, the last Beatles song has been released. I covered this on our first episode when it was first announced, and the reporting on this was horrible. Basically, the articles read like Paul McCartney was using AI to create a zombie robot, John Lennon. I've said this before, which was not the case at all. What they were actually doing was using an AI tool that was developed by Peter Jackson's team for the Get Back documentary to separate audio into individual elements that could be cleaned and mixed. And what they did for this song is take a poor quality old piano vocal demo that John had recorded on a boombox and, to my understanding, wrote for Paul on it, although I've since heard that it was actually Yoko who wrote for Paul on it later after John died before she gave Paul the tape, so I don't know. They pulled the vocal out of it, cleaned it up, and boom, you got a clean, pristine John Lennon vocal take. And I actually filmed a live first-time listen to the song and official video on the Random Mind Records channel. I'll try to remember to put a link to that in the description so you can go check out my initial thoughts as I'm hearing the song for the first time, checking out the video for the first time. But basically, I thought it was good and I liked it. The technological marvel of hearing John's voice clean and clearly John Lennon was wonderful. Hearing George's guitar from the 90s anthology sessions, also great. Then you got Paul and Ringo doing new overdubs. And it was interesting, but also kind of weird hearing a Beatles track with a clear modern recording sound on the instruments. And that's not what the original Beatles music sounded like because they were recording this in the 60s on that equipment. So that was interesting, also weird, but it was really high production quality. The song itself, and I said this in the reaction, is not a top-tier Beatles song. And I know I got at least one comment that said something along the lines of, well, it may not be top-tier by today's standards, but if this had been released in 1970, it would have been a huge hit. And that type of response has nothing to do with what I said. Absolutely meaningless. First of all, it is a huge hit now. It hit number 7 on Billboard. And even though you could argue it would have charted higher 50 years ago, in terms of the number of people hearing it, it probably got more ears now than it would have then, just because YouTube and Spotify is so ubiquitous and you've got more people checking it out. You've got multi-generations checking it out. Then it was more of the young crowd that was listening to the Beatles. Now you've got the original Beatles fans checking it out. You've got people whose parents raised them on the Beatles checking it out. You've got a new generation who are being introduced to this old music. So I feel like actually more people heard it today than they would have 50 years ago. What I'm talking about whenever I say it's not top tier is the overall songwriting. It's a song about a relationship, about loss, about longing, which is fine. It's great. But John wrote songs with much more meat and depth and interesting lyrics. And there's a possibility that he wrote this about Paul, particularly if he did write for Paul on there. And if so, that elevates it a little bit because it's about the band and about their relationship and that rich history that everybody knows now. But even if he didn't, because John and George have passed, it now retroactively becomes a song about them being missed by Paul and Ringo. And that also makes it more special than it would have been otherwise. I also really enjoyed the video that used the digital technology to insert old footage of John and George into new footage of Paul and Ringo, and young Paul and Ringo with old Paul and Ringo. And it felt very much like the wacky experimental stuff they did in the 60s, and I think John and George would have approved. As a Beatles fan, I'm glad it got released, and if this is the final song, I'm happy to have been here for it. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Consider supporting us on Patreon, and We'll see you soon.
Can't have no words like that. Words like that.